to our July 3rd Friday Focus. This is a recorded version coming to you from Knoxville, and the focus is community gardens and community food systems. So we're going to hear from some great master gardeners and agents about how master gardeners work with community partners to contribute to local food systems. We're on site at the Concord Community Garden to hear about how it got started, how master gardeners contribute, and the impact in the community.
And we are so glad you all are here for Concord United Methodist Church Community Gardens Tour. I'm Mike Smith. I'm the co-chair. This is Marcia Lehman, who is our executive director of the garden. And we'll tell you about some of the history of the garden and how they got started. This garden that you're going to be looking at first is from 2014. It is called Far Drive, or now affectionately known as the South 40. Harry Tucker and I were on a mission trip, and I found out he was a master gardener, and I volunteered with the Society of St. Andrew, and we started talking and said, well, we need to make a community garden. And we got back to church, and this area, this plot here, had been sitting around for doing nothing for 4 years after we sold the house, the church did, and we talked to the powers to be, and they said go for it. So we have a 70 by 90 foot garden, which Harry said we think we need to go over and talk to Marcia and Barbara O'Neill. They're at All Saints, and we did, and they said you need to start small. And we said it's 70 by 90, and I thought they were going to pass out on us. About did. That first year, Marcia told me that I was going to become a master gardener, and I said I didn't have time. And the week before the closing of the registration, I got a self-addressed envelope one afternoon with the application in her hand and gave it to me and said, fill it out. So as of 2015, I am now a master gardener. And at the same time, in the end of that year, for the state awards, Marcia said we needed to fill something out and see if we could become the...
we did a Search for Excellence application in the fall of 2015, and in the spring of 2016, got a shovel. So, and congrats to all the counties who won so far this year.
Yes, yes, yes. So we have progressed and grown, but now it is absolutely gorgeous, and it is full of vegetables, and we are now year-round. But the first year, this was a spring garden, summer garden, and we got about 2,000 pounds out of it that first year, and we were very proud. Now, by that, anything that we grow in the garden, in the community garden, we give 100% away. If you adopt a bed, we ask you to not only sign the papers of adoption papers and have the ground rules that you can read them, but we ask you to give back 10% or a tithe to the garden so that we can give that away with our community side, and we ask you for 10 hours of help in the garden in the community side.
So I'm Marcia Lehman, and Mike referred to me as executive director, which is a bit of an exaggeration. But when I tell you how I got involved and how master gardeners got involved here, you might understand why he says that. So the garden started in 2014 as a summer garden. They first planted in April. I didn't even know it existed. But Harry Tucker, who was the only master gardener involved at the time, would come to every monthly meeting and say, we've got this new garden at Concord and we could use some help. So about this time of the year, 2014, it was in June, I came over and I took a look and I saw 3 70-foot rows of tomatoes that had not been pruned at all. And it was like, yep, you need some help. So it took me a week or 10 days to recruit 10 other master gardeners to come out, and we paired up with 10 church volunteers, and it took us the entire Thursday evening work session, but we took 7 gigantic trash bags of prunings out of those 3 rows in about 3 hours. So the other thing that happened was at the top of the hill in this garden, Harry had planted watermelon and cantaloupe as a way to increase his poundage that year. And they did beautifully, and there were lots of fruits hanging on. And then we get to July and thunderstorms and the like, and they all split and rotted. not one was harvested. So at the end of the season, I kept coming back over the summer. At the end of the season, Mike said, "Are you coming back next year?" And I said, "There's two criteria. One is you will become a master gardener," and yes, I did give him a self-addressed stamped envelope and the application. And the second is you will get rid of the overhead watering.
No, I forgot about that part.
Yeah, so they did both of those things, and so I've been coming back ever since. But every year we get a couple of interns who will come out and try their hands if they're particularly interested in veggies. Some of them really take to it. I think the most hilarious is that Caesar Stair, our current president, has come out, and Caesar loves okra. And so he will come out and pick okra when it is 85 degrees, and he always goes home with a few stuffed in his pockets. But anyway, that's how Master Gardeners got involved. We actually tried doing Speakers Bureau events here on a weeknight evening. We drew a reasonable crowd, but it really interfered with the standing work session, so we didn't continue that. But there are probably about 10 Master Gardeners who are here with some regularity, some frequency. I find myself being here more than just Thursday evenings. The standard work sessions are Thursday evening, which Mike has called the garden party. Monday morning or Saturday morning is Saturday morning fun time, which is more of a work session. That's when you'll find guys working on drip irrigation or somebody with power tools building something. And we may be harvesting. And Monday morning is called picking and grinning because it's focused on harvesting.
All right, I'm Ryland Thompson. I'm a Knox County Extension Agent. My responsibilities are residential and consumer horticulture. I'm the Master Gardener Coordinator, and then I also have 4-H responsibilities. You know, I really can't give Concord United Methodist, Community Garden enough credit. Last year, Mike and Marcia together had over 1,600 hours out of our 13,000 hours of volunteer time. So they do put a lot of effort and a lot of work into this. And, most of Mike's, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure he will, we're out here. So, with our community, Knox County is a very urban and suburban county with our rural areas as well. So a lot of times, nonprofits will reach out to me and say, hey, what's a good model for building a community garden, or what's a good, way to do this or that? One of my first thoughts is, how does Concord United do it? They do an amazing job. They do the adopt-a-beds. They donate most of their produce to the community. So, that I can say several of the nonprofits have actually reached out and wanted to talk to Mike directly and see how he runs it. So, just kudos to them, across the board on this. It's great for the community.
Start out, we have 3 gold projects for Girl Scouts, and this was our very first project, the green shed over here, and you can panorama to that if you want, or we'll get it back to us in a little bit. That she built this with her family, her friends, and part of us were out here helping her. It took about 3 months to finish it up, but it's a beautiful 12 by 12 shed. For Eagle Awards, the benches that we have here, and the picnic tables and the benches and the compost bins was our first Eagle Award. The second one was then, we had a young man who said he needed it. He wanted to do one for us. He did the first half of the pavers that you'll see in a little bit, and 2 elevated raised beds for older folks that they can work with. Then we had a Girl Scout troop that came out and said they would like to do a silver award for the whole troop. When they did the patio and the arbor, and then the other mom and sister did, or daughter did the pollinator garden that is behind Natalie right now.
And those are now, one is a monarch way station,
and we are now a monarch way station.
The other is a certified wildlife habitat. Compliments of the Girl Scouts.
But we give to food pantries, we give to places like Teen Challenge, which has young ladies that they've gotten off the street to help them get their education. Thrive Lonsdale, which is an after-school program over in the Lonsdale area, which is typically a lower income area. and CARM, which is Knoxville Area Rescue Mission. We deliver to them through the Society of St. Andrew, but also through our gardens.
No description of Concord or community food systems in East Tennessee with Mike Smith would be complete without a mention of the Society of St. Andrews. This nonprofit organization has been around since 1979, and each year they distribute 25 to 30 million pounds of fresh produce to communities all across the United States. They do everything from gleaning in the field to picking up excess to producers, as well as food drops, deliveries to food pantries. In fact, Mike, as a conduit to the Society of St. Andrews, actually even picks up produce from University of Tennessee trial sites. So my home garden variety trials in Knoxville actually are distributed thanks to Mike and the Society of St. Andrews.
We pick up from UT at 6 different places last year. Concord United Church Community Gardens gave away 9,126 pounds. From Sunrise Supermarket, we picked up 14,700 pounds. From Edible Arrangements, we picked up almost 9,000 pounds. From Crop Drops, which are mainly sweet potatoes, and it did have butter beans last year, 34,000 pounds. And from seed potatoes, where Society of St. Andrew figures if you've got one potato of seed potato, it will yield 8 pounds of regular potatoes. We got 42,000 pounds, so we think that gave away 336,000 pounds for local folks in need. USDA has started a program, and hopefully it'll go through December, that they are calling them family produce boxes. There's 20 pounds in a box: apples, oranges, potatoes, onions, squash, zucchini, and cucumbers, And that 20 pounds is already boxed up. They have USDA has paid the farmer to grow it now and not turn it under. Then they send it to the distributor who bags it up or boxes it up, and they are being paid by USDA. Then they send it to us, Society of St. Andrew, and we're going to give away 1,728 boxes on Saturday. That'll be 34,000 plus pounds it will give away this Saturday. And we've done this now 3 times, so it'll be 92,000 pounds by the end of Saturday morning. And that's us in a nutshell with the Society of St. Andrew right now.
So in these 2 rows, we've got some of Dr. Bumgardner's trials. At this end, we've got the standard summer squash trial, which is why we have these lovely little tags. And on one side it has the name, and on the other side it says weigh separately for those who are harvesting. At the far end, we have the patty pan trial. And in the very middle are just some standard zucchini to delimit the 2 trials. The other thing is that one of our master gardeners, Lisa Krizda, has taken responsibility for these squash trials. And last week when I was here, she looked up in her records. Last week it was 4 weeks, so today it is 5 weeks today since these squash were just seeds put in the ground. And the night that we planted it, it wasn't just Lisa Krizda and me. We had Anne-Marie Ramsey, one of this year's interns, was here to help, and a couple of other folks. If we move on up a row or 2, you'll see another trial. These are the cucumber trials, and in this case, it's a church member, not a master gardener, who has taken responsibility for these trials. So here we have the DMR 401, weigh separately, and the General E, weigh separately, and then we've got some other standard varieties down the rest of the row. But as I say, it's a church member who's taking responsibility for this one, and a master gardener who's taking responsibility for the squash trial.
The five rows of tomatoes have come from Lenoir City High School, a 4-H club. That's their fundraiser every year, and so we have bought from them since 2014.
As Mike mentioned, we get these tomato and pepper plants from the Lenoir City 4-H club at the high school. And when we got them, they were quite small. We set them out on April 23rd. We had about 10 volunteers that night, and we did 150 tomato plants in about 35 minutes. But that's because one of the other volunteers had pre-drilled the holes. The first people to arrive put 1 tablespoon of tomato tone in the bottom of each hole. And so when our 10 volunteers showed up, we gave them some basic tutorials about set the plant to the first set of leaves. That was their depth marker. And when they got them all planted, then we came back along afterwards and pinched those bottom leaves off. As you recall, we had a frost on May 8th. And so the good news was that we set our trellis panels about 15 to 18 inches above the ground, so the plants were still below the trellis. So if you had come out here, you would have seen 5 rows of agribon, and the plants took no frost damage. So we were worried, but as you can see, everything turned out well. Some of the things we do, I mentioned, we do trellis, we use cattle panels, we use the 8-foot sections, so there's a stake every 8 feet. And if you come around, the first thing I would point out is we prune everything off up to the first cluster of fruit. And folks will laugh and say, what do you mean? But we call that shaving their legs. So it's not a horticultural term, but all of the regular volunteers now know what that means. And so if Mike's to-do list says, shave the legs of the tomatoes, they know exactly what to do. We are now at the point where we need to start taking off some of the extra foliage, being careful to leave enough that we don't sunburn the plants. Also, in the beginning, we bought the green tape and we would tear off about 1 foot and we'd come in and we would tie up plants. But we've gotten smart, and this happens to be my own, but probably one of the best investments was buying a tapener, which allows you to just come up, come around, it staples and cuts. So we pay close attention to keeping the bottom part of the stems really cleaned up. And as everybody knows, tomatoes like to send out additional suckers down their low. So every week we come in and we clean that out again. And as I say, we're now at the point where, yep, there's a whole lot of tying up that needs to be done. The way this thing works is the first click captures the tape and pulls it out. And if you need extra, you just get it this way. Come up to where you want to tie it off, come around, second click, staples and cuts. Because tomatoes are so prone to disease, is that from the beginning, when we prune, we always clean our pruners between each plant. So if we're pruning one, before we move to the next, we spritz our pruners, and definitely when we find we've got the beginning of a little bit of leaf spot. So definitely when we're taking off any spotted leaves, any brown leaves, it's snip those off, spritz your sprayers. So if when you look in the other shed, there's about 6 bottles of sanitizer, and volunteers know, grab a pair of pruners, grab a bottle, and as you work your way down the row, you just hang it on, and they've got a bucket for their clippings, which then go into the trash. Again, with volunteers, it's hard to say, oh, they're not diseased yet, so you can compost the clippings, but then how do you tell folks when to stop composting clippings? So we just say, never compost tomato clippings, always put them in the trash. Play it safe.
I want to thank everybody for coming and how much fun we've had out here today. Concord United Methodist Church has sponsored us, but we are basically self-sufficient. We get our money from donations from folks that come out and participate. Will help us some, but it's basically a family affair now, and we've enjoyed having you all come to be with us today. Thank you very much.
Thanks everybody for taking the time for coming out virtually, social distancing with us, and looking at what Concord had to offer and what they do for our community. You know, it's very important, you know, what their mission is, but it's also important, you know, to partner with other organizations. You know, that is essential for a long-term success of your projects. Have a great day.